And we are live for another episode of the Black Stitch Hockey Cast. Luckily, our last episode was 2 days after the draft, and all the chaos that came along with that. With this week's episode coming on the edge of free agency, and all of the signings that came concurrent to that for the NHL, meaning that this is effectively the last last major episode of the podcast until realistically next, which is what it is. A lot of
Yeah,
stuff to go over for free agency for sure.
yeah, we're at that fortuitous point of the summer where there are enough transactions to keep things going on current events, but this is basically the last instance of that for a while. Soon we're going to have to be talking about more esoteric things like, I don't know, best German-born skaters of all time, and uh, things you would see in like NHL 2K5 trivia.
Yeah.
It's fun times though, for sure.
Oh yeah. And then after, as that goes along, we'll hit into the major hockey season
Yep.
You say fun
with all
time?
the various projects we'll be working on as we get Super Mass CAC hockey starting in November, for the first and maybe final time in 8-team Mass CAC before the emergence of the LEC. A great D1 season for Hockey East, as BC looks to ascend back to the top of their conference, as BU will look to move into the Cole Iserman era following the Macklin Celebrini era. So I guess we'll jump into it a little bit of really was anybody genuinely surprised by any of the free agent signings that occurred over the last week? Anything that really caught us off guard?
I don't know. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised to see that Hampus Lindholm was the main guy who was behind recruiting both Lindholm and Max Jones. Obviously, Pasa's kind of been known as being a very big recruiter for Boston the last few years, so it was cool to see. I mean, honestly, I didn't quite know. I'm not surprised, obviously, with both of them being connected to him, but pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the only surprise. I mean, something that I definitely do wonder about of why Vancouver and Boston didn't just fucking put a trade together at the deadline, provided Zadorov and Lindholm obviously going to Boston, and then DeBrusk, Heinen going out west to Vancouver. Kind of a little bit of an amusing free agent turnaround there. Definitely. I mean, DeBrusk to Vancouver, I thought was mildly surprising. Obviously, there was definitely a decent market for him across the league. I do believe that DeBrusk had maybe wanted or had some fit with Edmonton, obviously due to his personal background in that team, but obviously Jeff Skinner becoming available at a reasonable price on the wing and a cheaper price at that due to his compensation from Buffalo over the next 4 years probably really pushed DeBrusk to Vancouver, as they're the only team that I was aware of that was super interested in him besides Edmonton. beyond that, though, you know, trying to really rack my brain around. Oh yeah, it was Forbert. Forbert was the other Bruin that migrated out to Vancouver. Just really, like, I guess Eric Gustafson going to Detroit was definitely not something I expected. I really thought him and the Rangers found a pretty good fit. Not really sure if, maybe New York didn't really make a big offer for him or really any offer at all for him, but definitely a little surprising to see Gustafson head out to Detroit.
Yeah, it's also going to be interesting to see Tyler Bertuzzi signing in Chicago because, I mean, obviously, again, I wasn't expecting, but even like him not like Chicago wasn't on his bingo card going into the offseason too. So I mean, obviously, like you and I both talked. I mean, Chicago definitely made some questionable signings as far as you kind of look at where they're kind of moving towards and some of the money that they're handing out.
Yeah, I mean, Bertuzzi to Chicago, not that surprising on my end. Like, did I think that he was I've said a lot of negative things about Tyler Bertuzzi, the hockey player, on this podcast over the last 38 episodes or so, and I'm going to say another one here. I mean, there's a reason why he's in Chicago on a Blackhawks team that's going to be just as fucking bad this year as they were last year. Tyler Bertuzzi's a guy who just doesn't move the fucking needle, and Taylor Hall's another guy who just doesn't move the fucking needle. And I just look at, the Chicago Blackhawks free agent signings the last couple of years, and nothing they do surprises me because nothing that they do moves the fucking needle. Trading for Ilya Mikheyev as a reclamation project in their middle six was actually a pretty intelligent move by Davidson, but aside from that, bringing back Toivo Teravainen is cool. You got another decent overpaid middle six winger. You got Tyler Bertuzzi, who's a decent middle six overpaid winger. You brought in Patrick Maroon, who pretty much adds fucking nothing to your team. You have an injury-prone Alec Martinez with one foot in the retirement home, and you have TJ Brody, who was an absolute fucking liability in the postseason last year. The only addition that they really had, I thought, that moved the needle at all was Laurent Brossoit potentially getting a shot to be their number one goalie.
Yeah.
But hey, man, what do I know? I think that I think most of the contracts honestly handed out this year were not great. Standing out, probably one of the worst deals. And I'll have to defend this take a little bit, but man, the Brett Pesce deal.
Thank you. I think
in
it's
New Jersey.
Overrated too. Keep going.
The thing with Pesce is just I don't know. I just based on team, term, and dollar. If the Anaheim Ducks handed Brett Pesce the 6-year, $5.5 million a year deal, it makes sense on a team that's so devoid of right-handed defensemen and really just veteran defensive depth. But you look at a team like New Jersey, who already has Dougie Hamilton and Simone Nemeth playing that position at that side, and you just sit there and it's just this. What does this? This basically ensures that you have the most overpaid third-pairing defenseman in the league besides Nikita Zadorov. The irony being, Zadorov. Both are good contracts and good signings on different hockey teams. Zadorov basically being an overpriced third-pairing D-man for Boston is effectively what New Jersey went out and did with Pesce, and neither of them have the upside as a two-way player plus the guys they play with for the deals to make sense to me.
No.
But then you look at fucking Grzelcyk going to Pittsburgh, and Damian and I talked about this, Matt Grzelcyk on a one-year deal for less than $3 million to play on Pittsburgh's third pairing, which was clearly a fucking point of need for them. I sit there and just really don't understand how somehow like Kyle Dubas let that fall into his lap while teams like New Jersey and fucking Boston are chasing third pairing guys to get like to pay second pairing money.
Yeah. The thing that like stood out to me about that deal is like aside from the fact that he's kind of like already sort of de facto flexed out of getting meaningful minutes, it's like we're talking about a guy who's 30 years old at this point, who's going to be there long term and producing gradually worse results, getting paid too much money for it, and has already been having declining statistics and performance the last 2 seasons on what is arguably a better defensive core, or was, than the one he's joining. So it's just like on the face, like it just doesn't look good. Never mind the fact that you already have considerably better options, with a longer window. And in an odd sense, like a team that's still pretty damn useful is actually applying a window to itself, whereas it didn't even arguably have one prior to that.
And like you look on the flip side of Pesci, and conceivably what is a bad deal but also a good deal is I look to a former Pesci on and off again pairing mate in Brady Shea, where like at first I thought that the Shea deal was fucking awful. Like my first thought was 7x7 for that guy, and then I looked at Nashville's roster, and then I looked at Nashville's prospect pool. All of a sudden I realized, they really don't have a high-end left-handed fucking OFD anywhere in their fucking organization. So Brady Shea effectively goes into Nashville of, well, we don't literally have a plan for this position for the next 5 years. Like, Jeremy Lauzon, clearly not the answer. And Roman Josi can't conceivably do this forever, can he? Question mark. So, like, you look to a guy who definitely was overpaid for his ability, but, like, nevertheless, had New Jersey gone out and got Shea, it would have been equally strange. But, like, I look at Nashville there, and, like, Nashville's that weird hockey team that went out and overpaid all three of their big free agent signings, but I look at their roster and say, all of these signings filled an organizational hole that needed to be filled on a playoff caliber team that has a light prospect pool for star potential.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy where I look at what New Jersey did and I sit there and be like, there were guys out there for New Jersey who I thought would have made substantially more sense, in the sense that, like, their blue line wasn't the fucking problem. A lot of it was coaching, but, like, I think of a world where you have Eric Halla as your 3C, and somehow, somewhere out in the ether is Alex Wenberg. And of course, they couldn't have matched what New Jersey, San Jose offered to Wenberg, but, like, upgrading their 3C probably was more valuable than signing fucking Stefan Nason to a 3-year deal. Where a guy like a Wenberg, or, I don't even fucking know. Like, there were guys out there who have that third line upgrade ability for them that they just didn't really fucking, to my knowledge, even look at. Like, even a Jack Roslovich, like, would have been more aligned with what they're trying to do there, and just really tonally bizarre for them. And, like, conversely, when I look at a team that made a really good signing at the chagrin of Damien, like, the St. Louis Blues going out and getting POJ, like, is Pierre-Olivier Joseph a needle mover? No, not really. But when you look at just how fucking decrepit and ancient St. Louis's blue line is getting between Parayko, Krug, Falk, and Letty, like getting any young D-man that can even do any semblance of anything for the Blues based on just really the lack of quality young defensive prospects in the org. Like, I know there are a lot of Theo Lindstein fans out there, but he's still 2 or 3 years away. So like POJ fills a very specific hole in St. Louis. So I'm gonna give the Blues a rare moment of credit for doing something good because it doesn't happen too fucking often. But at the same time, was surprising that they actually went out and like did something valuable, as opposed to the LA Kings, who they've had an off season. That's kind of like Jay Fresh talking about Logan Stanley. Like they had an off season, man. The players signed and players left. The off season was definitely an off season. You've never seen an off season as off seasony as this off season for the LA Kings. Like I don't know, man. I don't know. Like we're in a world where Kings fans and people are hyping the Kings up as, oh yeah, man, we're a strong playoff team. We're a great hockey team, Morty. And I sit here and think, you're either going to have Warren Fogle or Tanner Jeannot playing in your top six on the wing at some point to start this season, because you're absolute fucking abyss of right wing depth, which is somehow worse than Anaheim's, which is fucking remarkable. You're in a position where, like, Alex Laferriere is going to be pushed to your top line, and you're going to have a legit fourth line winger in your top six. But hey, this is a great hockey team. And your only fucking viable, like, two-way transitional Ds are fucking a 34-year-old Drew Doughty and the already somewhat injury-prone and misutilized Brent Clark. But hey, you got Joel Edmondson. Joel Edmondson's, it's a real needle mover. Along with fucking Darcy Kemper, like, yeah, a guy who had an 89 save last year in Washington, who got chased out of the crease by Lindgren. Yeah, it's definitely a really good team. It's definitely a championship caliber team in LA right here. As people, for some fucking weird reason, see them as somehow being in the same conversation as Vancouver and Edmonton. Like, this team is objectively worse than they were on the last day of the regular season. They're not better.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is, like, you look at like Seattle again, obviously team being in that division, and I mean, honestly, again, they did give out two big, long, interesting contracts, but like, I feel like overall though, I feel like they kind of did improve some of the areas of opportunity in general. So it's like, I don't know. I think Seattle could, pending a lot of it's obviously going to be on like Beignets and Wright, but I mean, honestly, again, Wright had a phenomenal season, his rookie AHL season this past season. I mean, he had 13 points in 12 playoff games. And you look at Matty Beignets, where it's like, yeah, okay, he had a sophomore slump, but I think he'll bounce back. But I mean, yeah, they're kind of like, when you look at their roster, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe they're a little like stud, like star, like whatever you want to call it. They're very blue collar and whatnot, but I feel like they definitely did solve. They have a good roster. I think their roster, like Montour, I think if Montour lives up to at least some of the hype from what he did in Florida, I think he'll definitely add some of the, obviously the offense that they've been kind of looking for. But I mean, they have a lot of young players up front, so it should be, I don't know, it should be interesting. It's not as, but I don't know. I mean, obviously the Chandler Stevenson signing is a little more interesting as far as, like you were saying, where you're paying a good amount of money for ultimately most likely a third, fourth line center with what they have.
Well, when I say that ironically about Stevenson, like, Stevenson fills the 2C gap today.
Yeah,
in the long run, like by the time we're even halfway into Stevenson's contract, he's playing on the wing or he's on the bottom, because like if Shane Wright figures out the offense. You have Beignet as your 1C. Hell, potentially Beignet as your 2C based off of his offensive regression last year. But like you come into a world 3 years down the road where Wright and Beignet are both going to be jockeying for that 1C spot because neither of them play on the wing, and then you're going to have Berkeley Catton entering the chat, and he's just not a 3C type profile in his. And like, there's nothing wrong with Berkeley Catton's not going to be playing outside of your top 6. So like, there's really just no. By the midway point in Stevenson's contract, this is going to be like a. Damn, he's basically Charlie Coyle 2.0, except unlike on the Bruins, young guys surpassed him.
Yeah, and this is like the risk factor was particularly prevalent just on his face in the immediate future, just due to him coming off a season where any VGK fan will tell you he was fucking abysmal, especially relative to what we know he's capable of in that role. So already something that could potentially blow up in Ron Francis's face, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, both signings are very high risk, very high reward. Like,
Yeah.
I won't call Stevenson very high reward. We're going to call that moderately high reward. Like, sure, if Brandon Montour can replicate what he did playing with Gustav Forsling and fucking Aaron Ekblad, where he's in the thing that gets me with Montour, though, and just really the thing that concerns me is, like, it was already fucking clear and obvious he's already regressed. Like, we already know that the 22-23 campaign for him was the exception, not the standard. And if you really look at what he did last year, it's not like fucking Brandon Montour was elite last year. And, I'm not a betting man, but I am a guy who pays very close to operational and analytical trends due to what I do for my profession. And man, if you're betting the fucking high side of what Brandon Montour can do, which is what fucking Francis has done, you're basically doing what Treliving did with Huberdeau, where you were betting on a fucking once-in-a-lifetime season. Like Montour's already regressed back to a .5 PPG player under heavy ice time deployment. Like, his giveaways are already doubling his takeaways, which has been the trajectory for his entire fucking career with the exception of his breakout season. Like, his relative possession metrics are pretty close to fucking zero historically. Like, his expected plus-minus is pretty much regressed back to the mean. Like, this is a dude who had a magical fucking season and is historically a fucking bottom-pairing replacement-level player that now has a fucking, 7-year deal worth more than $7 million a year. Like, this is pretty much the defensive equivalent of the Huberdeau contract in Calgary. And hey, if I'm wrong and Montour puts it all together and has another elite star to superstar caliber season, like, good on him. But man, is this a fucking gamble. And that's the price you pay in free agency when you don't have a lot of good defensive prospects. Teams love to this is one deal that has been heralded, and I love it, but I hate it, man. Is that Tyler Toffoli deal in San Jose is so goofy. But I gotta say, props to Tyler Toffoli for A, going out and getting the bag, B, not having fucking I don't know what derogatory term I want to use towards players, but he doesn't have this empty hole inside of him where he thinks he needs to go win even more championships. Like, good on Toffoli to just kind of get the bag, hang out in California, play with some future stars and Smith and Celebrini. Good on him after having the nightmares that he's had in fucking New Jersey, Calgary, and Winnipeg. And even to some capacity, like Montreal, and Tyler Toffoli has had a real weird career since winning that Stanley Cup in 13-14.
Yeah.
But he's another guy where I really look at the contract and really question how fucking. I don't think Mike Greer was drunk, but he might have been. Of like, Toffoli's another guy who's getting a big dollar value, moderate term contract after really having what was an exception, not a norm type season. Like, he's already regressing back to to a normalcy where like he's a fringe star at that. He's like a fucking .55 PPG player pretty consistently. Handing out $6 million a year to a guy like that who's playing, it's just not good. It's not good business by the league, but it's great business by the player to get his bag.
Yeah. So who do you think had the best offseason so far as signings?
Short term or long term?
I mean, I don't know. What's your pick for both?
Short term, probably Nashville. They plugged pretty much all of their holes, leveraged their cap space efficiently, and basically bought themselves time to draft and develop their fucking internal prospects better instead of rushing them into the system. And like small pickups that won't be talked about as much from them was obviously the signing of, former Texas Stars goalie Matt Murray to be, the AHL bridge guy if Askarov or when Askarov inevitably comes up to the show. Like pickups like Nick Blankenberg, pickups like Vinny Hinostroza. Like they got depth guys, they got star guys, Barry Trotz did a great job just covering all of his bases to make sure that his team is successful this year and beyond. For a team probably building for the long term, and this is definitely a bit of a homer take. It's definitely a full-on homer take. I really like what Anaheim did in the offseason in the sense of we didn't go out and give anybody shitty long-term contracts this year like we did with Killorn last year. So we pretty much kept our internal roster together. Didn't really bring in any external free agents really outside of what Jansen Harkins. And, really only made one trade to bring in, or two trades to get, Robbie Fabry and Dumoulin to get us up to the cap floor. And, Robbie Fabry's going to benefit, hopefully, from not being fucking injured for the first time in his career, but also playing with any combination of Carlson, Zegras, and McTavish. And, really like it, the Brian Dumoulin acquisition of... He's just going to be a guy with no expectations who's going to just mentor young guys. So, the Ducks didn't really do a whole lot to be fucking better in the short term, but the moves that they did make, if theoretically Fabry has a great season playing with Mason McTavish theoretically in the opening half of the year, if they're able to flip Fabry for a fucking high draft pick next season or at the deadline, what they did, zero short-term benefit for the most part, but really only potential long-term gains of having guys like Fabry in the room, having guys like Dumoulin in the room, and also just not giving anybody a shitty long-term contract that fucks them in the long run, kind of like, what Chicago did with Bertuzzi.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I kind of rose an eyebrow about regarding Nashville was how the conversation seems to have shifted towards Askarov as a potential trade piece in the near future rather than the staring them in the face. You have a potential very good goaltender tandem, as we discussed the possibility of many times over, and it's just ignoring the possibility there is for both innovation and success there would be pretty disappointing, even if it doesn't significantly harm the competitive window they've created for themselves.
Yeah, I am a little intrigued by them picking up Scott Wedgwood. Because, the reality, the Ducks did the same thing last year to some capacity when they went out and signed, I want to say Alex Stalock, could be wrong. Not particularly important. I think it was some veteran goalie, and it was the thought. Like I sat there and said, "Wait, we really don't think Lucas Dostal is ready to play in the show 30 to 40 games this year after getting in a bunch of good games the year before." And then obviously he wins the backup job out of camp and is effectively probably going to be our opening night starter based on where Gibson's career has just been heading. And obviously I think whichever goalie we brought in, not in the org anymore. And I just feel like Scott Wedgwood's kind of in the same boat where like Wedgwood's probably going to be in the AHL, just like Korpisalo is probably going to be in the AHL to start the year when he inevitably gets outdueled by a younger goalie. But yeah, the Ascaro of Saros tandem, it's going to happen for at least a couple years.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
You wouldn't guess that because of just the immediacy of how people are treating it. Like we've already seen like a fair amount of speculation about how the very soon trade candidates are, which is ridiculous to me because like I just think that that does more harm than good ultimately, especially knowing that like no matter how you package it, you're not going to get really a good return anyway.
Yeah. One thing I still don't understand, even though it's not off-season related, but it's technically off-season related. Man, do I not understand the Islanders. Like, at the end of the day, I look back to their first-round playoff exit, and I just kind of sit here and think about them playing Varlamov over Sorokin in those games. And I understand Patrick Waugh being Patrick Waugh, but, like, you have a 28-year-old goalie who's under contract for the next 7 years or so, making $8.25 fucking million, and you're trotting out a 35-year-old Semyon Varlamov in the most important like games, and it's just like I don't really know what the fucking Islanders are doing anymore. Like, they're a really confusing team to me in the sense of like, are you guys in your window right now, or are you guys just edging? Like, like you have a young prime Noah Dobson, you've got a young prime Alex Romanov, you have prime Pulak Pelech, and then like in your forward group you have a prime Horvat, a prime Bart Zal, a post prime Lee. You just went out and got 28-year-old Duclair. And you're like drifting towards the twilight years of Nelson and Palmieri's career, like, but yet you're starting a fucking 36-year-old goalie. Like, I don't entirely see what the fucking Islanders are trying to accomplish, like, at all. Like this, like, at least the Washington Capitals have, they've owned who they are. The Washington Capitals are the island of fucking misfit toys with Sally the doll and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and like, the Capitals are just a bunch of fucking discarded scraps from other teams that are somehow going to make the playoffs again because under good coaching and like freedom, like, Dylan Strome has become Dylan Strome. Ovi's Ovi, like, Mangiapane is just going to go to the net and hurt people and score goals, like, PLD will bounce back. Like, LaPierre, McMichael, Protas will just continue to develop. Miroshnichenko will continue to develop. Like, Brandon Duheim's just a good fourth-line fundamentals player. Like, to be able to get fucking Jacob Chikrin, which is fucking insane to me that Ottawa parted with him to get Nick Jensen the fucking pick. Like, how the fuck did the entire NHL just let this team get a combination of Chikrin, Carlson, Sandin, Roy, Baravari, and TVR? Like, yeah, Matt Roy is not that good, but like, he's still better than what they fucking had. Like, Washington just feels like that. How do they keep getting away with just? Why do teams? Like, I just keep thinking like their entire team is just the Will Smith meme of, why does he not want me, man? I don't have the motivation to make a meme for all of their guys from that episode of Fresh Prince.
Also makes you kind of wonder, though, that like what obviously the Bruins and the Sanders trade talks. I mean, obviously, I think at the deadline, I'd seen that Boston was interested in Chychrun, but I'm really wondering what like Ottawa wanted back from Boston to get.
Probably well, the thing is, the Senators aren't stupid. Like, Steve Stais isn't stupid. Steve Stais is not gonna put a guy like Jacob Chychrun on his schedule 5 times a year for the foreseeable future. Like, Stais wasn't dumb enough to send Chychrun to Boston and then deal with him in Boston. Like, if he's in an aging Capitals team is not going to be a threat to Stais' long-term plans in core. Like, I don't really understand why they wanted Nick Jensen. And the world will probably never know why they wanted Nick Jensen. Other than, like, yeah, I don't really understand why he did what he did on that deal. But hey, you just don't trade good top 4 defensemen in your own division. It's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. Like, if you're gonna be outgoing, have a piece like that outgoing, and just sort of like kind of be beaten in the ones and zeros in the deal. You would rather it be with someone in the Met rather than an opponent in the Atlantic who already have, especially like a very good defensive system and culture. But yeah, I mean, like, Brian McClellan has definitely been impressing me, giving me some Howie Roseman vibes even at some point. He's got the machinations going down. Like, I honestly think that if they keep him long term for when they inevitably do go into a rebuild, he's not going to be, out of his depth at all when that time comes around.
And even to double down on Washington heading into their inevitable rebuild, like, they've done a really good job already, pre-rebuild, putting together some high-quality pieces. Thinking about Miroshnichenko, Protas, McMichael, and most recently, Paris, Kak, and Hudson. Like,
yeah, and having Ryan Leonard waiting in the wings,
like they've done a very, very good job. Even Vincent Iorio, not a bad defender. Definitely has some solid, bottom pairing, stay-at-home upside. Good skater profile. Like, they have Hendrix Lapierre, too, keeps slipping my mind. Like,
yeah,
they have a bunch of solid pieces for their long term for when the rebuild. They're going to be a team where I think their rebuild is going to be a lot shorter of a runway based on if they develop their prospects the way they have been. Like, Washington's definitely, again, at Damien's shame, is going to very quickly outpace Pittsburgh's turnaround time after the Ovechkin era, just based on really good. Well, there's two things at play for Washington. They've done a really good job drafting and developing young players, but Washington is also actively not trying to win the Stanley Cup. Washington is not actively trying to be like overtly competitive and mortgaging their future to get Ovechkin a second title. They're effectively just trying to get Ovechkin a fucking scoring record and maybe play a couple of playoff games. So when you're not mortgaging your future to try to chase the biggest prize, it allows you to actually restock the cupboard because you're not going to be playing in June. Like, everybody in this org knows what Washington's trying to do, and nobody has a problem with it. So they're effectively silently retooling and rebuilding in the background,
yep.
Which is something that surprises me that more teams haven't done. Like, you really wonder about what if the Boston Bruins stopped fucking throwing the war chest at a cup run the last couple of years and did the same strategy, like how this could have shaken out for them.
Yeah, but like you said too, I mean, Washington's good at drafting and developing, and it's kind of been an issue for Boston.
Oh, for sure, but like, even Don Sweeney fucking gets a lottery pull out the ass every once in a while with guys like Poitras and Lurai. Like, if you keep enough high draft picks and you fucking hit, you have to be like belligerently incompetent to miss as often as, the Columbus Blue Jackets did between 2000 and 2009. And even they didn't miss on every fucking lottery pull. Like, if you're not using those picks, and like I look at Anaheim as a team that kind of did a really bad job at leveraging keeping those picks. Like you look at all the guys we took before the rebuild when we were aging out, and just the inability for guys like Emerson Edom and Ricard Raquel, Sam Steele, Max Jones, Nick Ritchie, like we just fucking did not get guys, but we did have guys. Marcus Pettersson was a guy who we traded. Shea Theodore was a guy who we traded. Hampus Lindholm was a guy whose prime happened to be when we were shitty. So like, if you don't do what the Ducks did, and you actually hold on to these picks and use them effectively, like you end up in a good spot. Unfortunately, teams like the Ducks that try this model doesn't always work out. But man, like I don't know, the Bruins and even Pittsburgh, like not trading all your fucking picks was just bad, man. Feels bad.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, though. Is I think a lot of these teams, when you look at the pressure from the fan bases, and I mean, especially with social media and stuff, it's a thing. You know, it definitely affects it. But when you have such hungry, big market teams and the fan bases, and again, we are all feel the same way about some of these fan bases, but I feel like that definitely does play a part into it when you have a crowd that's like, okay, we want to win every year. That's the expectation. And obviously, it's not realistic. And, obviously, again, you have to be smart. But I feel like that's definitely a part of it where there is that pressure on some of these GMs and these organizations, even if it isn't reality.
I think that comes more from ownership than it does from anywhere else. Like the Jacobs family continues to allow Cam Neely to run their organization like a fucking offshore drilling company, solely because his whole impetus is to just get fucking cheeks and seats to the point where, as I alluded to within our first several episodes, much to the fans' chagrin, added as many uncomfortable seats as possible to the Garden. Like, you look at teams like Boston and Pittsburgh's ownership, especially now with the fucking Fenway Group, like, owners that don't give a fuck and just want to play playoff games to get that fucking playoff revenue. Like, that's the real reason that, like, the Pittsburgh Penguins' dark ages are very much on the horizon because the Fenway Group they're going to do some really ignorant shit as soon as the Penguins start to lose. And, it's definitely concerning. Because, like, it has nothing to do with the fan expectations of winning. Is the Fenway Group bought the Penguins right after they won within years of them winning their fucking fifth Stanley Cup. So like they're just sitting there thinking that they've inherited this fucking hockey gold mine in terms of profit with dollar signs in their tiers, realizing that like the Pittsburgh Penguins organization is famous for having a horseshoe so far up its fucking ass in rigged draft lotteries to get two of the best players of all time.
Yeah.
That once that well dries up, inevitably, like the Penguins are a fucking second-rate duelist with a third-rate deck organization.
I mean, it's possible the actual trajectory might even be worse than we imagine, considering, like, think about this, like, this right here is their primary investment in their portfolio. And, initially the aim for John Henry and company was just get the Red Sox under the luxury tax apron. But now it's just like we're at a point where even their primary projects are just things that they have they're just treating as items on their investment portfolio rather than actually like meaningfully putting anything into the product that will make it better in terms of providing successful and meaningful entertainment, but it's also something that they know that they can make money off of due to the brand recognition aspect. And I mean, you can basically see that same complacency from Los Angeles Kings fans who, like, as I've discussed before, and as our boy Cal Stanford, also known as Hardcore Dowdy, pointed out, their fans are complacent because they won 2 cups in their lifetime, which they, often point out. But like the current brain trust is like, not that same group. In fact, it's the group that forced that regime out and is basically placed them in a state of mediocrity. But like the other side is like, it's tough. I actually do feel like sort of bad for Kyle Dubas because he does have like, I mean, is he a little bit overrated based off of the actual results of his Toronto run, and bearing in mind that a fair amount of the core was not his machination? Yes, but is he also a genuine innovator to a fair degree, and also like willing to take risks and pretty good at player dev? Also, yes. And like we saw it with the Max Swanson selection. Like, I really think, and like I pointed it out as like a very good pick in my article for valid reasons. But like when it comes to him really wanting to take the big swing to improve the on ice product, he might be handcuffed by his bosses at FSG, in their frugality, and that's like, a tough like balancing act to be stuck in. Of course, maybe we see Pittsburgh on a similar like rise based off of like internal culture, not tied to what's going on up top, with we're seeing with the current Red Sox season. But you never know, especially with the strict framework that the NHL operates in on top of that.
Yeah.
Especially this is like a league where, this is something like me and my group chat discussed on the low. Like the one thing about hockey that's like, one of the things that like it's strict cap rules. Like sure, it hasn't like worked in terms of handcuffing dynasties in the way that they anticipated, as we've acknowledged before. But you also know exactly how long a competitive window is going to be, or you have a very good idea. Whereas like with the NFL and its like means of getting around the solid cap, you never know if a team is going to be competitive for like 3 years or 7 years. Like you just don't know.
Yeah, and even in the NHL, like, beyond that, you never know when locker room culture issues are going to derail what should be a historic team. Like, I'm waiting for the documentary, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get it, on the rise and fall of the 2016-17 Montreal Canadiens. I mean, that was an organization in the roster that was primed for greatness, and instead...
I mean, I think you know who I'm inclined to blame for that decline.
Yeah.
God, I fucking hate that guy. Like, it's amazing. Like, I just like I am very, very rarely like so negatively disposed to an NHL executive that did not make my team worse, but he's just so unlikable, and also was so overrated by like at his height for some trades that he happened to get right. Because there are a lot of things he got wrong too, and he's a fucking piece of shit on top of that. Like,
yeah, I mean, it was karma though for PK to go to Nashville and almost get the cup. I mean, for him to kind of be the guy who kind of got scapegoated for a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, though, the 15-16 halves fell apart, and then the 16-17 halves weren't shit. Like, this is a team that had the fucking trajectory to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender and a legitimate threat to actually win multiple
One
championships.
thing I suspected at that time, and as much as like I am still very much inclined, just knowing like what a negative tone he said in that FO and the effect that it had on the dressing room in turn with regards to Bergevin, like I've always thought, especially knowing that coaching reunions, which they are prone to, don't work out, that they probably quit on Michel Therrien as a group as well. Like, and it's especially just like they have had a long track record of having very unlikable head coaches, in addition to having unlikable GMs, as we've talked about here as well. So it's probably plausible that Therrien was just like losing the room to an extreme degree. Had a hand in that as well.
You know, the one, even some of the guys in the room, like one player who I've always kind of questioned, and I don't think I'll ever stop questioning him, is Max Pacioretty's ability to single-handedly destroy cup contenders between his runs in Montreal and Vegas, his stint in Carolina, and even last year in Washington. Like, it's amazing, and I don't know if it's coincidence or if it's him. But man, Max Pacioretty really has, you know, the Midas touch of shit when it comes to good hockey teams. Where like you just kind of see everywhere he goes, just very slowly but steadily fall into ruin, and somehow the leadership, like it's known that him and Subban were very much at each other's throats. It's known that him and Price were not particularly tight knit as well, and it's really interesting how even like as Eichel came into the Vegas room, Pacioretty saw his way out. Like the timing of Pacioretty's in and out with multiple teams really makes me speculate what he's like in the room because most players don't have a reaper that follows their leadership around to the extent that Pacioretty does.
Sure. Although it is like to tack onto the Therrien point. Like I mean, we've seen it happen like multiple times now that the hit like ascension for like their cup wins have often come as like you go at the change in dynamics in the room. Like they the head coaching boost for them in '09 when Disco Dan took over from that room was real, but like you also had to imagine that the departing head had something to do with that as well. Although it like the Penguins do have like a history of like winning in volatile states, like which makes sense because that's how their organization is run as well. Because like I mean like other than 2017, there's been some like transitional phases like with their victories, like because like you'd think Bob Johnson was there for the first year, and then of course he got really sick and passed away, and then Bowman took the reins just fine. In addition to the things that happened in the 21st century as well, so it is a bit odd, but it you know, as I like to say, all of these things can be true at the same time.
And with that, Liam, do you have any developmental things you'd like to touch on this week?
Yeah, so according to Dan Milstein in the Sport Express, it does look as though there are talks for Igor Chernyshov's contract to be terminated with Dynamo Moscow, which will allow him to develop in the North American setting and sign an ELC with San Jose while playing in Saginaw, with the Spirit having selected him in the CHL import draft. Let's see. In very, very early stage developmental news, the Brick Invitational just came to a close in the Edmonton Mall today, with the Detroit Junior Wings having defeated the Toronto Bulldogs 4-3 in the final. This a very impressive performance was had by 2014 for year Christian Kolarek with his hat trick and one assist in that game, including the game winner at the 3-minute mark of the third period. He had a very good tournament over to PPG performance. sure you'll be hearing about him somewhere down the line. Then we'll see quite some time from now in the 2032 NHL entry draft class where he goes there. On a New England related note, both the Boston Junior Bruins and Connecticut Junior Rangers made it to the knockout stage with the Junior Bruins eliminating the Rangers, and I believe a 3-2 victory in the quarterfinals before falling to the eventual champions. So no shame there, but good to see our region represented in the next phases. And on another CHL-related note, I can report that Landon Dupont still has not been signed to his scholarship and development agreement with the Everett Silvertips. I don't know what's going on, if they're just waiting to hire a new head coach, which is a vacancy they also still haven't filled. But, I mean, it's not like this is a situation where there's a lot of delicacy which it needs to be handled. I mean, Dupont is going to be one of those players who's going to be successful no matter who the head coach is. So I don't really know. But I do know that at least those talks haven't been stagnant, as I noted last week. But this is going to be the running gag until that deal actually gets done. And now we can transition into our formal big finish. So I'll start things off by saying I swung and missed on this a couple weeks in a row, but I did have a couple of hockey-related stories from when I was down in NYC for the Dillinger reunion. I had a run-in with some Flyers fans who were very pleased to see the socks that I had on, and especially knowing those guys were from the Philly area, so they really respected that not only was I not a Bruins fan, but I was sticking my neck out for a rival deep within enemy territory. So that was a cool interaction. And within the restroom, between sets on night one, I encountered a guy in a Draisaitl shirt and an Oilers hat. And I gave him an update on the story. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting the notifications on my phone. I know what's up." And within minutes, that interaction turned into multiple guys including a friend of his saying, "Let's go Panthers," practically freaking yelling it and filling that whole sink area with it, and him giving one of them the double bird. So that was nice. I was glad that there was something, a couple of relevant things that occurred over the course of events of those couple of nights, seeing those shows. But, to the point about the Oilers, we didn't touch upon this, which is fortuitous because I've been making, I wanted to make a point to have this be the bullet point. Man, there are a lot of things that they did, where they already have a roster that's probably better than the one that, in a forward group especially, that's better than the one that took Florida to 7 games. But, that Matthew Savoy acquisition, not only did they significantly improve, what's arguably the worst fucking prospect pool in the league, very quickly, somehow I just, I'm looking at this team that's in a transitional phase of what its front office is going to look like with, Ken Holland stepping down, riding off into the sunset. And it's a bunch of teams that are in rebuilding phases could have easily fucking fleeced Kevin Adams and got someone who fucking, is going that fits a rebuilding team's fucking timeline at a very, very low cost. And I'm just we have a proven model of success in the form of the Panthers, the same team who I'm going to tip my cap to the Oilers, to the Panthers for having built a Stanley Cup winner in the manner that they did, with a similar approach to Kelly McCrimmon and his success in PGK. Like, Bill Zito, you didn't get enough respect as the GM of a Stanley Cup winner on draft night. Like, that was something, like, that's a standard formality that seemed to have gone by the wayside this year. And now I'm just really looking at it. Like, there are a number of teams that could afford to be taking that approach right now, as evidenced by the price that Savoy went at, and including the team that I root for. Like, we amongst many other rebuilding teams, really could have added someone with 1C potential at no real cost, and we didn't fucking do it. And none of them did. Instead, a team whose competitive window is now did it. And it's just like, what the fuck? Like, this is just another reminder, along with the two previous Stanley Cup winners, is that GMs need to start having some balls when it comes to building by trade. The possibility is there, and it's just like, it's not only are teams not taking it up, but they're literally letting it pass them by, and it's disappointing. Like, the NHL, for the most part, even with the standards of success that are being established, is just being laughed by other leagues when it comes to innovation in terms of building competitive teams.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know. So, I look at off-season signings, and I look at teams that, have a good team that, I'm not going to say you're one player away, but you have a weakness, and you make a signing that greatly improves an area of opportunity. And I think Toronto did that with Anthony Stolarz. I think that when you look at the season he had, he was the backup, but he still led the league in save, GAA, goals allowed adjusted GAA. And then when you look at, he was 7th in goals saved above average. He's a very solid goalie. Obviously, the year before, his stats were dipped a little bit, but that Anaheim season.
I was gonna say his stats were
really
fucking
rough.
unbelievable for playing behind the worst defensive team in NHL history.
And that's what I'm saying. Where somebody might be like, "Oh, hey, let's look at that stat line," but all the goalies were left out to dry that season, and his stats really, even still, weren't that bad, which is crazy. So I think with Toronto, when you look at their goaltending issues over the last couple of seasons, especially in the postseason, and with injured goalies, which has happened, the last 2 postseasons, where I think he just offers a lot regular season, postseason, and I think him and Wall, I think, are going to be a great 1-2 tandem. So Toronto, good job with that signing.
I want to give you some perspective about that goaltender tandem too. Is that not only was Bobrovsky someone who was forced out of our org, but the Flyers originally drafted Stolarz with a pick that was acquired in the Bobrovsky selection. So
that's wild.
Basically, that goaltender tandem winning the cup was rubbing the nose of Paul Holmgren in absolute shit, more or less. And Ron Hextall, for that matter.
Well, I guess I'm going to look to the Dallas Stars for having a fairly quiet opening to the offseason, but 2 really crucial signings for them was obviously the return of Matt Duchene on yet another 1x3, which really tells you how much he's loving the Nashville Predators paying for his mortgage. And secondarily, I really like... I hate it for Vancouver, but I understand it for Vancouver, and I love it for Dallas. Casey DeSmith moving down to Texas to back up Ettinger. Obviously, him playing in tandem with Demko was fucking phenomenal. Him playing in tandem with Jari was playoff caliber up until the point that it wasn't. Honestly, there isn't really a much better 2A option in the league. So for a Dallas team, a 3-year, $1 million AAV cap hit for a solid fucking backup goalie. Just all around, real quiet couple of strong moves there from Jim Nill once again.
Yeah. He just he finds his ways, whether it be by hitting those diamonds in the rough or just doing these small underrated things that have a surprisingly impressive effect. Well, as we were kind of discussing, the in the cold open, like we are kind of like headed towards like something of the dump months, the summer dump months, as opposed to the winter dump months at the movie box office. But you know, we'll still be around. We have our ways of pulling things out of our hat and finding, you know, entertaining things to talk and write about, even when things come to a lull. So you'll still be seeing us plenty in the coming times. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening in on Spotify in the future. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Have a good night.